Hey guys, in this video I'm going to teach you the basics of testing in Django while building a simple CRUD application. The form of testing we are going to learn about is called TDD, or test-driven development. This means that we write the tests before we start working on the code itself. This might sound a little bit weird, and it can feel a little bit weird at first as well. It can also feel redundant and slow, but I can guarantee you that you will like it if you give it a try. TDD is very popular and it ensures you that your code will work much better. This form of testing also makes it easier to write better code because you actually have to describe the problem before you start building. Anyways, enough chit chat now. Let's start learning. So I have Django installed, so I'm just going to create a new project now. Django-admin, start project, and then the name, which can just be TDD testing. So let's go into this as well. So that's done. So then I can open this in a editor as well. Okay, so I want one app for tasks because I want to make a simple to-do application here. So let's just go back to the terminal and create an application or Django app. So Python manage.py start app task. And then I can go back and find the settings.py and register it here. Task. Great. So when this is done, we can start testing. Yes, we haven't done anything, but we can start testing anyways. So if I find the task app here and then the tests.py, this is where we want to run the tests. So what I first want to test is there a Django model for the tasks, and is there no tasks in the database, which should be the default case here. So let's create a class here, class task model test. I'd like to end all tests with the test name and then model here, just to show that we're actually testing a model. And then in here we pass in test case, which has already been imported from Django. And then we can write one function here, def test task model exists. Pass in self, since this is a class. And then we want to get all of the tasks from the database. Tasks equals task.objects.count. And here self.assert equal tasks 0. So what we do here is that we get all of the tasks, count them and assign them to this variable. So this should be 0. And then down here we check or assert that tasks, which should be 0, is equal to 0. So let's try to run this test now. So if I then go to the terminal and say Python manage.py test, this will run all of the tests in the database. Okay, so I get here, the name task is not defined. Of course, because I haven't imported the task model yet. So let's import it from .models import task. So we can try to run it again. And then I get a new error. You can't import task from task.models. And that's because we haven't created this model yet. So that will be the next step. So let's go back here now. Go into models.py and create the model here. Class task, pass in models.model, and we can have one title field, which can be a models.char field. Set the max length to be 255, and we can have a description field as well, which can be a text field. And let's make sure that this can be blank as well. So blank equals true and null equals true. So now the user doesn't have to fill this out. So if you now go here, run this again, then you will see we don't have this table, and that's because we haven't run the make migrations yet. So let's do that. Python manage.py make migrations and Python manage.py migrate. So there is actually no way for me to know that this here was the problem. It's just that I know that you have to do that every time you create a new model. So anyways, now that we have done that, we can run the tests again. And you can see here, ran one test, OK, so everything is OK now. And what this actually does is that it creates a dummy or test database, but we even had to create our own database as well. But when we run a test, Django will create a dummy database, fill it with data if we give it data to fill, and then delete it afterwards, so it won't affect the data that we have in our database. Okay, so now all of the tests are running. Nice. Let's create one more test. Let's say that we want to have a string representation for the task, so that this actually is returning the title by default and not the class name. So we can create one more test here. Def test model has string representation self, and then we actually need to create a task for the database, because if not, it wouldn't be able to test that it actually has this. So task equals task.objects.create title equals first task. And now that we have a task in the database, we can say self.assert equal task and task.title. So we just want to know that what we get back from this automatically will be the same as the title. So if I save this now, run the test again, then you see that this will be a failure, because as you can see here, this is not equal to this. So right now this is the string representation of the class, but we want to change this to be the title instead. So let's go back here now, go into models.py and say def str self return self.title. So then we can try to run this again, but now this is actually a fail. And if you see here now, we get the title there, but we still get this as an object and not as a string. So I need to change the test for this. So here we should say string. So we convert this to a string and compare it with this one. Okay, so let's save now, run, and now everything is running. Nice. Before I continue, I just want to say thanks to all of my patrons. If you too want to support me, you will find a link in the description below. Okay, so this was very basic. In the next part now, we will learn how to check what template a page is using and if the status code is 200, which means that everything is okay. So let's go back here, create one more class index page test, pass in test case. And then here we can say def test index page returns correct response. And see here that I use very long function names, but this makes it very easy to understand what this test actually does. So here we need to pass in self again, and then in here we want to get the response when the client or user go to the front page. So response equals self.client.get, and we want to get slash, which is the front page. This is what we can use to mimic or pretend that we are a browser. So then here I can just say self.assert template used response task.index.html. Sorry, task/index.html. So I want to make sure that this response that we get from the front page uses this template. We can also check that we are getting the correct response code so that it's not a redirect or similar. So then we can just say assert equal and pass in response.status code should be similar or equal to 200. So if I now go and run the test again, I will get errors. As you can see here now, no templates used to render the response. Okay, so there are no response there that returns a template. That means we don't have a front page yet. So if we go to views.py now, we can create this. So here is a def index request return render request, pass in the request parameter here again, and say that we want to use task/index.html. If I try to run the test now, it will still fail because we haven't imported this to a URLs file yet. So let's create a new URLs file in this app, urls.py, from django.urls import path, and then we can import all of the views in the task app from .import views. Now we set up the URL patterns path. So the front page should go to views.index, and we can set the name to be index as well. So then I just need to import this into the main urls.py file. So here I can say path. So if the path is empty, we want to go in and check if any of the URLs matches the URLs in the task app. So here you can just include task.urls. Now I will get an error because I haven't imported this. So together with path, we import include. So if I now go back and run, you will see that we get a new error. Template does not exist, which means that we got one step further in the test. So next step now is to create the template. So create a new folder. Oops, not there. Inside this app, templates. And then a new folder, task, and then in there the template, which was index.html. This doesn't need to include anything actually, because we are not testing for that yet. So now we know that if, for example, try to rename the template we are using in the code directly, we are actually getting a failed error here, because now there is something wrong in our code. So that's why TDD is a very good approach when building big projects, because you need to write the tests before you write any code. Okay, so next step then, we can try to make sure that the front page is listing out tasks. So let's try to create a test for that. Def test index page has tasks, self. Then we want to get the front page again, or the response, like we did there. And then we can create a task. Let's copy the one we do up here. And then we can say self.assert contains response. Oops, response should include task.title. So now we will probably get a new error because the front page doesn't contain any text. You can see here, false is not true. Couldn't find first task in the response. Okay, so we can work with this, which means that now we need to list out the tasks on the front page. So first we need to get the tasks here. Let's import the model from .models import task. Then we get all of the tasks from the database. Task.objects.all. Then we can pass them in here, tasks and tasks. If I run, it will still show the same error because we haven't done anything in the template to show this. H1, welcome. Then we can list them out here. So for task in tasks and for, now we list out the title here. P task.title. Then we run this. Okay, still getting error. That is not how this was supposed to go. Okay, it might be because I can't create a task there. Sorry, I need to move this above the response because the task needs to exist before we run this. So let's try to run this again now. Now we get an OK. There's also one more place we can create the tasks. We have a setup method. So def setup, pass in self. Then we can just say task, oops, equals like that. But now this isn't available down here anymore. So we need to assign this to self.task. And down here we use self.task.title. Let's run the test again to make sure that it's still working. Yes. Okay, so now we are actually showing the task on the front page and we are testing that it is working. So now that we have a front page, we also might want to have a detail page. So we can copy these lines here and just paste it down here. Rename the test to detail page test. So detail page is of course where we click on the task to see the description. So this task should also have a description. So description, the description, like that. So now we are creating this as well. Okay, so since this is now tested, we can do the same as we did up here to make sure that the template is loading and it is the correct. Test detail page returns correct response. This should use the detail.html template. But now we are using this URL, which is not correct. Here we need to pass in the ID of this task. So we can pass in a variable here by saying self.task.id. Then we just need to pass an F in front of this tick to make sure that we are formatting a string, because then we can use variables inside like this. So slash the task ID and then a slash. Let's run the tests again. Okay, so it ran 5 tests and 1 of them failed. The one that failed was test detail page returns correct response. It doesn't use a template. The error here should say that the view doesn't exist or similar, but we have to work with what we have. So let's create a new view for this. Def detail request primary key, because here we want to get the task from the database based on the URL we are on. So task equals task.objects.get, where primary key is primary key. Then I can copy this line, just rename this to this variable, and the template we want to use is detail. The test will still crash because we haven't imported this to the URLs file, so we can do that before we run it. Path, here we expect an integer called primary key, and when this is present in the URL, we want to use views.detail, name detail. Okay, so let's try to run the tests now. Okay, so it got one step further. The template doesn't exist, so let's create that one now. Detail.html. Nice, so now all of the tests is running. Perfect. Okay, so then we can do a test to see that the title of a task is present and that the description is there as well. So let's write the test first. Def test detail page, detail page has correct content. Pass in the self parameter. Then we want to get the response just like we did here. Okay, so then we can do some assert contains just like we did up here. That the response contains the title of this task. Copy this. And we want to make sure that the description is there as well. So let's run the test. Okay, so now we got failure here again. Couldn't find first task. Okay, so let's go here. Print out the task title. Task.title. So we can try to run it again. Okay, so now it's failing because the description isn't in the response. So we need to show this as well. Task.description. Save, run, and now this was okay as well. Perfect. So I also want to make sure that if there are more tasks in the database, that we are not showing this as well on the detail page. So let's create 2 tasks. Self.task2, task.objects.create, title, second task. You can just copy the description like that. And then down below, where we are make sure that these are actually working, we can say self.assert not contains. Pass in the response and self.task2.title. So we don't want to show these in the page. Okay, so it was still working and everything is okay. Nice. Okay, so now we have an index page with the list, we have a detail page. So now I want to learn how we can use forms, testing that the form is showing, that we can submit a form, create the tasks and similar. So let's create one more task, one more test, class new page test, pass in test case. Here I don't want to have any setup, but I want to make sure that we are using this correct template. So let's copy this and just do a few tweaks. So test new page returns correct response. Here we want to use the URL called /new, and I don't need to format this. The template I want to use is new.html, and of course I want the status code to be 200. So if I run this now, it will fail because we haven't created the view yet. So that is next step. Def new request return render request task /new.html, and now I will get a template doesn't exist error. No, I got the same one because I haven't imported this to the URLs, of course. But new /views.new has the name to be new. So then I will get the template does not exist. Great. So let's create that one. New.html, make sure that the tests is running and everything is in order. Perfect. Okay, so when we are creating tasks in Django, we want to use forms. So let's create a form now, and we can also write tests afterwards to make sure that the form is able to create tasks. So in this app, we create a new file, forms.py. From Django import forms, and from .models import task, and now we create the form itself, class new task form, pass in forms.model form, and we want to set up the class meta for configuration. We want to use a model called task, which we import there, and the fields we want to use here is title and description. Save. So then we can start writing tests to test these. So first we can import the form from .forms import new task form, and then in the setup of this I want to assign that class to a variable. So def setup, pass in self, and we can just self.form equals new task form. So now this is available in all of the tests in this class. Then we can say def test form can be valid. So we want to make sure that we can pass in and create a task. Pass in the self parameter, and then we want to first test that this form is this class, so there is nothing wrong there. Self.assert true, then is subclass self.form. Self.form is a subclass of new task form. So we can just test this. Yes, everything is okay. And then we can make sure that the title field and the description field is in the meta, so that we have those fields that we want to use. Self.assert true, title in self.form.meta.fields. Copy this and replace it with description. Okay, so test, still running. Nice. So now we can set up a form and pass it in and make sure it's working. Form equals, so now this is a local variable, not the same as we use up here. Self.form, pass in this dictionary with data, title, the title, and description the description. So if I run this now, nothing will happen because we don't do anything with this variable. But what we can do is to say self.assert true form.is valid, because if the title, for example, is missing, this will not be true and this test will crash. But it was running, which means that we can submit a form. Nice. Okay, so maybe we want to test if the new page contains the form, so that we are rendering the form and it can be used in the template. Def test new page form rendering, passing the self parameter. And then we want to get the same response as we did up here. Then we can say self.assert contains, pass in the response, which is just plain HTML, and we want to make sure that this HTML contains a form tag. Just copy this. We also want to make sure that we have the word CSRF middleware token in template, which means that we have the CSRF token there. And I want to make sure that we have a label for something. It doesn't matter if it's the description or the title, it just needs to be there. So let's run this, and now we got failure, couldn't find form in the response. Okay, so in here we can create just title very quick, new task, and then form method should be set to post, and we can set action to the same page we are on. Then we need the CSRF token, like that, and we can render the form. Actually, we can wait with rendering the form. Let's see what happens now. Yes, you can see here now we got through the test for this and this, but this is crashing. As you can see here, couldn't find this in the response. But if we here say form.sp and save, then it did not work there either. No, because I haven't passed in the form from this view yet. So let's import it from .forms, import new task form. Form equals new task form. Then we can pass it in here as a variable, form and form. So now this should run and everything is okay. Perfect. Let's also make sure that if there is an error in the form, we are actually printing error codes. So def test new page. Actually, I don't need to have a separate task test for this. I can just say here test valid form, and then below here test invalid form. So if I then copy this here, so we can do a new insert, just remove the content of the title, because the title is a required field. So then here we can say self.assert contains, and we want to make sure that the response contains a UL class error list, because I know that the HTML that Django creates has this when there is an error in the code. And we can also test one more thing, self-assert contains response, this field is required. So let's try to run this now. That will actually give me a fail because the response isn't defined. So I need to run the response here again. So actually just need to redo this a little bit as a response instead. Equals self.client.post, and we want to post to /new like that. So this is how I test for an invalid form. But since up here, okay, sorry, let me redo this a little bit. Up here I just want to test that the form is working. This is actually a little bit different and is testing that this form page can publish. So let's just remove this and set it back as it was. Then down here, I take this and I want these two lines as well. Sorry about that. So the test should be like this now. The page is rendering this, where we check that the form is rendering, and if this is then submitted, then we want to test if the error is showing when we are not submitting a title. Okay, so now we can run this again. Okay, so now you can see couldn't find this. And that's because we haven't handled form submission in the view yet. So we need to do that. You can do that by saying if request.method equals post. Then create a new variable called form where we pass in request.post. And if form.isValid, then we say form.save. Else, then we can just create an empty instance of this form. So now we are handling this and the error code should be showing. Nice. Okay, so if the form is valid, we want to be redirected to the front page. So let's test this. Test valid form. Then we get a new response. Let me just copy this. And then we want to make sure that there is a title. So we get a correct response back. Then we can say self.assert redirects, so that we want to make sure that the page redirects, and we want to make sure that this is the response that redirects and where we are expected to be redirected. Expected URL is / which is the front page. We can also here make sure that since this is valid, that the task is saved in the database. So self.assert equal task.objects.all, count, and this should be equal to 1 now, because now we have one task in the database because this wasn't created. Let's try to run this now. Okay, so you can see here down we got a 200 error. Now we got a 200 error, but we're expecting a 312, which is a redirect. So let's go to the view and fix this. So when the form is saved, we can say return redirect / so it redirects you to the front page. It will still crash now because here you can see redirect is not defined. So import this at the top here together with render redirect save. Okay, so now we have tests for testing the index page, the detail page, and the new page. So now I want to create an update page to make sure that we can update a task as well. So let's go back to tests.py and create a new class. Class update page test, pass in test case. Then we can set up a task so that we have something to actually update. Def setup, pass in self, and say self.task equals task.objects.create, title equals first task. And between all of these tasks, the database is reset. Therefore, this is the first task in this test. And then I want to test to make sure that we're using the correct template. So we can just copy that from this, scroll down, paste it not there but there, replace with update and update and update. And here we also want to make sure that we have the ID. So let's put F there so we can format the string and self.title.id. Or you can use .pk if you want that as well. So now I will get an error because we don't have, update page has no attribute title. So this should be self.task.id. Now I get an error that we don't have a view for this. So let's create that. So I can just copy this because we want to get the task from the database as well. So def update like that, return render request task /update.html, and then we pass in the task just so that we have it there. Save. And now I also know that I need to update the URL, so I'll make a copy of this and append update at the end, rename this to update, rename this to update, and save. So now I get the template doesn't exist error. Nice. So let's create the template, update.html, update, save. Nice. So now it is running. Okay, so then let's test to see if there is a form and that it's rendering correctly. So we can begin with the test for this. Here we can say def test form can be valid. So I want to make sure that the form can actually be valid and saved in the database. So we do the same thing as we did up here. Just copy this. Actually, we can take this as well. So if I scroll down and save it, paste it like this, we can rename this to update task form. Title and description should be there. But since now this is an update, we need to pass in this task into the form as well. So we need to set the instance here. Instance equals self.task. Then we just pass in this to make sure that it is actually updating. And then we test. Can this be valid? Yes. Let's save this, run. So this is failing now because the update page test doesn't have a form. Okay, we can work with that and create the form. So let's go to forms.py and say class update task form forms.model form, and we just copy this and paste it. It's not more. It doesn't have to do anything more than this. And then we need to import this at the top here. So update task form, and we can now save and run the tests again. Okay, so this still doesn't have a form. That's correct. So up here in the setup we can say self.form equals update task form and save, run again, and now all of the tests is okay, which means that all of the code we are expecting is also okay. We can also say here form.save, so we are saving this variable. Then we can test if the database has been updated by saying self.assert equal, then we pass in self.task.title, and we want this to be the same as this title here. So the new title should be the title and not first task. So let's run, and yes, it is working. So then we can continue to do a test to make sure that the form can be invalid. Let's test that quickly. Def test form can be invalid. Self, and then here we just set up a form instance like this and set the title to be empty. And then we say self.assert false, form.is valid. Now we expect this to actually be false. So if I save now, test it, it is running. Perfect. Okay, and just like we did up here, testing if the form is rendering correctly, that you can have an invalid form show errors and that you can have a valid form and be redirected, we can do the same thing down there. Let's just make a copy of this whole thing. Scroll down to the bottom and paste it. So just rename this to test update page. Then first I want to update the response just like we have up here so that we get the correct page. Then we make sure that the page contains these 3 strings. And we don't want to post to this URL, we want to post to this URL. And we can set in an empty title, but we want to pass in the ID of the task here. So ID, and then self.task.id. And we can also set the instance here. Instance equals self.task. And then we want to assert these 2, and we can also do the same thing with the valid form. Let's just update the URL, and then we expect to be redirected to the front page and that we are still having just 1 task, because we haven't created a task, we updated the task. So if I run this now, I will get a lot of errors. First of all, it can't find the form, so let's fix that. So down here we can say form equals update task form, pass in request.post, and we can also set the instance to be the task, which is this one. Then we can pass in the form down here like that, and now we can render it on the update page. Let's just copy the code from the new page, paste and save. We can try to run this now. Okay, so update task form is not defined. This comes from the task views.py file. So let's fix that. Okay, you can see here I forgot to import it. Update task form and save. So now you can see here, okay, I wasn't redirected after the assert equal to make sure that we actually are redirected. So just like we do up here, we need to make sure that we are handling the form request like that. Now we can copy all of this, paste it, just rename this down here to update task form. And here we also want to set the instance to be the task that we get from the database. So let's try to run this now. And now all of the tests, all 13 of them, is actually okay. Perfect. So now if I go back to the tests, then down here we can also make sure that the database is updated, just to make sure that this title is the one that's being used. So I can copy that from this here, scroll down, save, run. Okay, it failed because first task which you get from the database is not the same as the title. Okay, so self.task.title is not updated. Okay, so how do I get this? I actually need to redo this here a little bit because I need to get the task from the database. I can just get the first one because I know based on this that there is only one. So task.objects.first, like that. I can say .title to make sure that I get the title. Okay, so now the tests is running. Nice. So now we have index page, detail page, update page, and a new page. The last thing we need then is a test page for testing if we can delete tasks. So class delete page test, pass in test page, sorry, test case. And then we want to set up this with a task, so I can copy these lines from here and then just remove the form because we are not going to use a form here. And then we can say def test delete page actually deletes a task self. So now first we want to make sure that there is one task in the database. So copy this test here. So if I save this now, run, yes, it is running because there is a task because it was created here. Okay, let's try to run the deletion or try to delete this task by saying response equals self.client.get f because we want to format the string, self.task.id, and this is the one we want to delete. And when this is done, I want to know that we are redirected to the front page, and I want to make sure that we have 0 tasks in the database now. Okay, so let's try to run the test. Okay, this didn't work because here we got a 404 error on this one here, because 404, because we haven't created this. So that's the next step. Copy these lines, paste, just rename this to delete, and then task.delete, and then a redirect, so return redirect to the front page. Now we just need to import this to the URLs, delete, views.delete, and the name is also delete. Okay, so now all of the tasks there is running, so all of the tests. So now we have tests for a full CRUD application in Django. And that was it for this tutorial. Hope you liked it, and if you did, please hit like below. If you want more content like this, you need to subscribe to my channel, and remember to click the bell to get notification when I publish new videos. See you in the next video.